All right, to announce today's speaker, we have Jim Halderman. He's going to come up and give an intro.
Yes, good morning. Every now and then we're fortunate enough to have somebody such as a Barbara Gaughen-Muller come and join us. Barbara is a peace scholar, advocate, activist, author, and podcast host. She is internationally known for her peace work. As an inspirational speaker, enthusiasm for peace is contagious, and that's no fact. Barbara is president of the United Nations Association, Santa Barbara, Tri-Counties, California chapter, creating programs to end sex trafficking, climate action solutions. She is a co-author of the book Revolutionary Conversations. She hosts the Peace Podcast, where she interviews international business leaders, elected leaders, authors, NGOs, and more. Barbara is the program director for the fastest growing Rotary E-Club, the Rotary E-Club of World Peace. She continues the peace work of her late husband, Dr. Robert Mueller, the former UN Assistant Secretary General. Together, Robert and she created 7,500 ideas for a better world. There is so much more I could be saying, but I would really rather hear Barbara tell the story. Barbara, the floor is yours, or in this case, the screen.
Thank you. Thank you. Do you want me to go on gallery view, or should I just stay where I am? Let's see.
Sorry, we were clapping. Could you repeat your question?
I said, do you want me to go on gallery? You did it. That's the answer. Gallery view. You know, I'm going to start with my history. I was born in Denver, Colorado. I am so proud that I am speaking to Colorado. And when Tom introduced himself and said, I'm here, he said, you should see the view we have as we have our Rotary Club. And with that view, I am delighted to be here on Zoom. You know, because of Zoom, you can view me right up front. I love Zoom. I'm able to speak around the world. In Denver, Colorado, my dad had a dream. They were married. I was born. And my dad said, I want to be a fireman. But they wouldn't accept him in Denver, Colorado. He was so heartbroken. He put me and my mom, I was 6 months old, in his 41, whatever it was, Ford, and drove across the United States to Santa Barbara, moved on into El Cajon, and we ended up on my grandfather's farm. My grandfather had immigrated from Hungary to avoid World War I. And he had a farm in a town called El Cajon on a high mountain. And it was full of avocado trees. And then I lived there as my dad and mom worked at Convair. Why? The war was on. But they had jobs. And my dad said, my dream, I'm never getting my dream to be a fireman. So we lived with grandma and grandpa. And my grandma just was so precious. And she said the best days of her life was when I was a little baby and she got to raise me and my mother went to work as Rosie the Riveter. Well, you all know that story because we all were part, and I was a little girl. And then we moved to San Diego to our own home. And I remember at a time when I don't know what age I was. All I know is the age of when peace, August 15th, 1945, was the headline in the LA Times. Peace, P-E-A-C-E. 1/4 of the page was filled with the word peace. Why? We were celebrating, and you all know this. Probably most of you are too young to even know this. I too was too young. But it was the end of World War II. That word peace. I remember sitting in the 41 Ford, that's the car we still had, and heard all these horns honking. I was a little girl. And I said, Dad, what's going on? Horns are honking. We're celebrating the end of war, and we have peace. August 15th, 1945. When was the last time the LA Times had P-E-A-C-E? November 11th, 1918. World War I ends. as Germany signs the peace treaty. Why can't we have the LA Times have peace again? If it was up to us Rotarians, we would have peace again. We would bring peace to the planet. Oh, did I love your miracle shop story this morning. In Santa Barbara, we have Unity Shop. We all do significant things to make a difference. In Unity Shop, we not only have toys, the parents pick the toys, we have food. We charge them just a pittance for what that food would cost in the store. But they bring their children and they go shopping. The one thing that you said today was that you don't give it away. You don't come in as a rich person and give toys to a poor family. Just think what that does to the parents, how embarrassing. Well, Barbara Tellefson started Unity Shop. She wanted all parents to feel proud that they could shop and give their children food and clothing. They have everything in the Unity Shop. And with that, people have dignity, and peace is a dignity we deserve. Think about that. I was born in a time of war. In 1945, 30 Rotarians, 50 Rotarians, including 11 Rotarians, were recruited by the U.S. Department to meet in San Francisco, California, to help write the Charter for the United Nations. That's 1945, the Charter for the United Nations. Think about that. There was a charter created, and I'm going to tell you again, when the war ended in 1945, the victorious nations met to decide how to prevent such acts from happening again. That's my dream, to prevent such acts from happening again. They formed the United Nations, and I could just cry because it was such a moment for the world to have a United Nations to advance human rights and peace. In 1945, my husband was born in 1923. In 45, he was answering an essay contest on the other side of the world in Alsace-Lorraine. He was answering a United Nations Association essay contest. If you could run the world, how would you do that? And when he answered that essay contest, he mailed it off to the United Nations of Strasbourg. And a couple of months later, his mother heard a knock on the door. And remember, this is wartime. And she said, "What do you want?" "Well, we want to talk to Robert Muller." Well, Robert Muller, I could tell you stories about my late husband as a kid, what he would do, because he didn't believe in war. And the French were shooting the Germans, and the Germans were shooting the French. Why? Who knows? All we know is they ate the same food. They were all cousins. Somebody said, "We're going to bring peace by shooting each other." Doesn't that sound familiar? Isn't that sad? And not only were they shooting each other, they made the children dance in the streets as the soldiers roared through, guns loaded, machinery behind them. And this is what my dear late husband saw. And he made a vow. And he told his father, "When I'm an older person, I'm going to work for peace." And that father said to him, "Oh, I pity you, young man. You are not going to be rich. You're going to be poor, because there's no such thing as a peacemaker." And he said, "I don't care." Remember the knock on the door? He had just entered the University of Strasbourg. And he put an essay together about how he, as a peace thought maker, would run the world. And when that knock on the door was answered by Robert Muller.org, if you want to know more about him, Robert Muller, he said, "What do you want?" And they said, "You just won the essay contest." "Oh, the United Nations of Strasbourg essay contest?" And he said, "Yes, and you're going to get to go to the newly formed, what happened in 1945? United Nations. I get to work for peace. And his mother said, no, you can't go. Robert said, I have to go. I have to work for peace. And so that begins his life. And I'm going to tell you how he felt. How he felt. And this is what I wrote in his little, he just turned, if he would have been alive today, he would be 100 years old. He was born in 1923, and we're in 2023. The privilege of being married to somebody at the top of the world was a gift to me. And I created, with the help of all the people who knew Robert, a book club to bring Prophet, the hat maker's son, the hat maker's son. Robert was a hat maker by choice because his dad was a hat maker, his grandfather was a hat maker. And so when he went to the United Nations, his dad said, you can't go to the United Nations. You're a hat maker. You have to stay here. And Robert said, I have to work for peace. 40 years he spent at the United Nations working for peace. But I'm telling you, go to robertmuller.org and find out why that worked. Why he was able to create 24 of the permanent agencies there today. But in 1997, he was interviewed by the World Chronicle, World Magazine. And he said, the weakness of the United Nations to prevent or resolve conflicts, a weakness inherent in every structure of the United Nations. The United Nations is weak not because they're a one single power, but it has no military, no forces, no taxing power. It has nothing. It was probably devised as a weak organization that we conceived on earth to avoid war. But it doesn't have the rule of law. The main rule, though, is the rule I live by. And the rule is to never resort to violence. Remember, we talked about the charter being signed in 1945. What was the first thing that the charter said? To save all future generations from the scourge of war, the scourge of war. Think about our present time, about how we are now facing the scourge of war. I just read a book. The book is called War is a Racket. This book was written by a general. And in 1935 is a speech in a 1935 short book by Smedley D. Butler, a retired United States Marine Major General and two-time Medal of Honor recipient, wrote, War is a Racket. Why did I write that? Why did I read that? Because it was recommended by a friend. Now, I'm going to be your friend. And if you want to know about the early history of the United Nations, the early history of my dear Robert Muller, go to peacepodcast.org and you can hear some of the interviews we did with him, or buy the book on Amazon, Prophet the Hat Maker's Son. Now, let's go forward a bit. 1994, I did a conference in Santa Barbara at a peace center. It was the La Casa de Maria Retreat Center. I was on the board for 25 years, and I said, where do people go to heal? And they all said, well, we come here, but where do world leaders go to heal? I said. And they said, we don't know. I said, well, let's have a conference for world leaders, and they can come to La Casa de Maria in Santa Barbara, and they can heal. They can have what we give to the people in La Casa. And all of a sudden, I remembered peace. We need to have a focus. You know, world leaders are busy and they won't go anywhere unless you have an issue that they can deal with. So we asked Tom Van Zandt, who was visiting the University for Santa Barbara, and he said, okay, I'll run the first one. And let's go with the question, how do you go from linear thinking to global thinking? Because we have the United Nations, and it's the United Nations, Robert Muller, who said to me, I should do global maps. And he invented the Geosphere Project. So he invited 100 of his friends, world leaders, to La Casa de Maria, and 50 showed up. One result of that was Robert Mueller. He wrote, "I will attend with enthusiasm," on his invitation. He didn't write, "I'm the chancellor of the University for Peace in Costa Rica. I served 50 years in the United Nations. I started as an intern and retired as an assistant secretary general." No, "I will attend with enthusiasm." Well, you know, Tom knows, Jim knows, my middle name is Enthusiasm. I believe if you're going to say yes, say it with enthusiasm. And I said, I wonder who this guy is. I will attend with enthusiasm, coming in from Costa Rica. I'm in Santa Barbara. Long story short, I meet this gorgeous older guy, 20 years older than me, only up to here on me, but I didn't care. He had gray hair, steely blue eyes, and he was a mesomorph. He was strong. He was beautiful. And I said, "Oh, you must be Dr. Robert Mueller." And he just looked at me like, "Who's this woman?" And I said, "I'm Barbara from Santa Barbara, and I'm Barbara Gaughen, because I have a company called Gaughen Global Public Relations." And he said, "Well, nice to meet you. You remind me of my first wife who died." And then he got sad. He said, "My wife died of Alzheimer's, and it's nice to meet you." Well, you can imagine what happened. That was like a moment. And I did not have a husband at that time, but we just connected. Our hearts connected. We were like two magnets. And everybody kept saying at this week-long conference for world leaders how to go from linear thinking to global thinking. Why are two always together? And we said, we don't know. It's like we're magnets. We can't separate. And we were together that week with all those world leaders. And the speeches that Robert made, oh my goodness, I could not believe this man. He went to Mind Supermind and he was the keynote speaker. He got a standing ovation. Mind Supermind is brought on by our city college. It's a regular monthly event. And when he spoke, again, I said he got a standing ovation. And they said to me, we've only had 5 standing ovations, and this is the 5th in our 30-year history. He was so passionate. And then he ended his talk with the harmonica, and he played do 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 do, the Ode to Joy. I was in tears, and I thought, how have I been so lucky to meet him? So he goes back to Costa Rica, but not before the last day when I stood up as a public relations person and I said, today there are 2,000 days to the year 2000. If each of you world leaders would be so kind and write me a few ideas of how you would change the world, I'll publish the book for the new millennium. Imagine standing up in front of all these world leaders and telling them, I will publish this book. And Robert Mueller stands up. I'll do it. That began our relationship on the mail from his little cabin in Costa Rica. Long story short, we now have 7,500 ideas and dreams for a better world. Why? Because he would wake up every morning at 4 a.m. and start writing ideas from his wonderful career at the United Nations. So we got married eventually, and we've lived together for 17 glorious years. Now, here's the point of the story. I was lucky to be in the right place at the right time, and I said yes when he said, I love you. And I knew at that moment when he said, I love you, that if I said I loved him back, I would lose my Jaguar, my White House, and I'd be living on that humble little cabin in the country of Costa Rica. 33 seconds later, I said, this is my destiny. I'll do it. I love you too, Robert. And the two of us held hands from that day forward. But the point of my story, I spoke to Rotary clubs all over the world because Robert kept getting nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize. He got the Gaughen Peace Prize. We were in Japan. We were all over the world as he was collecting prizes. I don't even know who he was hardly. until 1994. And now all of a sudden I'm on the world stage. But the best part was I got to talk to Rotaries in Budapest. I got to talk to Rotaries in Japan. Robert and I went to Japan and we're in the big sumo wrestler stadium. And Robert starts to do his talk about the United Nations and world peace. And I just stand up and I say, my heart is with you. We are one. And I got a standing ovation. I didn't say anything else. And Robert said, you got the standing ovation, not me. And I said, it's probably because I'm so tall and I really have a big heart. And so anyway, we lived in that little humble cabin in Costa Rica with a legend that says, peace will come to the entire world from this mountain. And humble, I could not explain any more than we didn't even have hot water. We didn't even have a stove. And so I lived in this cabin with a hot plate, but I lived in that cabin with love and the dream that peace would come to this entire world. Now, there were some turning points in my life, and I'm going to tell you about some of them. This was one, obviously. Robert died in 2010. In 1987, in my beautiful way that I was, in the PR maven, I had an office in Hollywood. And my lawyer said to me, you know, Sylvia Whitlock just made a rule, or she fought for this, that women could join Rotary. Women could join Rotary? I said, I never heard of such a thing. It's a men's club. Nope. Women can join Rotary. And you will be invited to join the Hollywood Rotary Club. And I thought, well, if it's a path I have to travel, I'm saying yes. Okay, Max, let's go. But first I want to meet the men in the Rotary Club. And I went in the door and I said, I'm Barbara Mueller. No, I wasn't Mueller then. I was Barbara Gaughen. And I'm Barbara Gaughen, and I'd like to join your Rotary Club. May I come in? They clapped and they said, join us. I never had such an experience. Can you imagine being the first woman in the Hollywood Rotary Club? We met in the Hollywood Holiday Inn. And as you have a view, we had a view of the big Hollywood sign on the mountain behind us. The point I'm making is you never know what opportunities are going to come your way. I look at your miracle store and I think of the opportunities that came her way and how she has steadfastly made sure the dignity was brought back to Christmas with the gifts that those children wanted. The privilege of being a Rotarian, the privilege of being married to Robert Mueller, the privilege of being in this group today, of me being able to wake up in the morning and say, thank you, God, I'm alive. What do I have in store for me? Thank you for letting me speak to Jim Halderman and Tom's Rotary Club. Who are we as Rotarians? What can we do as Rotarians? You think about it. Peace is possible because of Rotary. Jim Halderman recently gave me a list of what actions we can do to build peace. What actions create an alternative to violence? Before I read some of his actions and some of his ideas, I'm going to tell you my philosophy. You must see the world you want to be in your life. You must see in your vision. You must have a vision for a world free of bombs, free of nuclear weapons, free so that you and your grandchildren can have a life of freedom and privilege. The privilege to be able to live the life you want to live without bombs bursting in air. What are we saying? Bombs bursting in air? I hate that. I want bombs thrown away and turned into peacekeeping. But anyway, if you start with that vision is what drives you. Why did Robert get in the United Nations? Because at 3, he said to his dad, I'm going to be a peacemaker. Why is that so powerful? The vision will drive you. The vision will take you. I never knew I was going to meet Robert Mueller, but I knew I wanted to work for peace. And in 1990, I wrote on a piece of paper, I'm tired of promoting things that only make a little difference. I want to make a big difference. I want somebody in my life. As a single woman, I'd like to have a companion, a world leader that I can work with. I want X amount of money in my bank account, and I want property so that I can leave it for my grandchildren. 1994 comes, my vision. And then I meet Robert. I still kept my house in Santa Barbara. And that's why I'm here today. But it was that vision. I met that world leader. And my grandfather's words came back. You're going to be a peacemaker someday. And I said, Grandpa, I'm only 3. How can I be a peacemaker? Well, you'll know what to do, but look how long you have to be a peacemaker. Robert comes along. Look at your life. What's your spiral of your life? Where are you and why are you here? Tom and I and many people are working on Ending War 101. If you haven't taken the course, you probably should think about it. Ending War 101. I'm going to try to do something here. I'm going to change my background. Let's see, choose a virtual background. I'm going to choose this background. And now you see Ending War 101. Ending War 101 with that QR code. I've gone full circle. And here I am, more than 80 years young. Why? Working for Ending War 101, making the impossible possible. Can war be ended? Is a just war even possible? What does tolerating war cost us? What can we do? And then I ask you, think about your life. Are you bringing peace to those around you? Are you realizing that peace is possible and it begins with me? And here I am, a Rotarian, right? And I speak to Rotary clubs around the world. My late husband, Robert Mueller.org, I say that because some of you may want to read some of the 7,500 ideas. They're all there free. Allowed me to be who I am, allowed me to be enthusiastic about ending war and bringing peace. And I can't remember the year, but I would guess it was around 1987, according to Ambassador Chaudry, that the International Day of Peace was created. Robert was at the United Nations, and Pathways to Peace, Avon Madison came in and said, Dr. Mueller, we'd like to have a day of peace. You know something? I've been thinking about that, he said. Do you know that every year we start the General Assembly and we should have a moment of silence and a day to remember that peace is possible? Long story short, today I read what Secretary General said we're going to do. Our goal is to present a unifying vision for peace and security, one that is clear-eyed about the magnitude of today's challenges and which addresses the concerns and priorities of different constituencies. So it's up to us to prioritize diplomacy, conflict prevention, peacekeeping, for which comprehensive strategies, political courage, and strong partnerships will bring peace to our planet. Now, I said I was going to read some of Jim's ideas. That's what the Secretary General said. What did Jim say? Build security locally and globally, diplomacy, internationally, better communication, etc., etc. Now, I'm at the end of my time, and what I decided, I'm going to let mentors. Remember I said, how do you go from linear thinking to global thinking? The answer was mentors. So now I do peacepodcast.org, and I invite you to listen to Jim Halderman. I invite you to listen to 120 peacemakers. And with that, I say, I'm Barbara Gaughen-Muller. Barbara from Santa Barbara, Gaughen because that was my first husband, and Mueller because I married Robert Mueller. And I'm a proud Rotarian, past chair of the Rotary Action Group for Peace, and bless you for having me today. I see your president is standing up. He probably wants to say something to you, and I'm going to say thank you, and peace be with you.